England deserve a lot of credit for coming so close in this one, but it's South Africa who advanced to the final. My name's Mark. Let's talk rugby. The rain was bucketing down in Paris for this one, and the conditions really dictate how the game was played. England using up and unders to good effect early on and throughout most of the game as well. Daly, he managed to tap one back to Earl. Peter Steph to Toy, he gets over the ball, but the referee says that there was no lift for him. Penalty to England then, because another South African, I think, wasn't rolling away. Farrell slots this for 3-0, England in front. Box then, they're trying to put some bombs up of their own, but Stewart was really solid under the ball all night for England. He's diffusing them and basically denying the box the kind of into the game that England are getting from similar kicks. South Africa then not straight at a line out in their own 22 and gives England a scrum in a decent position. England then run off the back of that scrum, win another penalty at the breakdown. Khaleesi, he's not happy with the call. Ben O'Keefe said the ruck, the contest was already won at the ruck and he wasn't allowed to go in for that ball. Farrell, though, he makes it 6-0 with the penalty. Tom Curry then gets pinged for in front of the kicker. Penalty to South Africa and a first real chance for them on attack as they kick to the corner. They go to the maul, but England defend very well. Itoje and Laws, they get in there and they just make it unplayable. And it was the second time that they'd done it in the game up to then. And England, I thought they defended the mauls really well. We know that South Africa, they're very good with their maul attack, but England, we've seen them before. Maul attack and maul defense for them, has gotten better and better as this pack has kind of come together as a unit. We then have a spot of handbags, and we had a couple of incidents like this during the game, but Tulagi, he comes from far away in to kind of escalate things, and if you do that, you're the one that's going to get pinged, so he gets a penalty against him. South Africa then kick to the corner. They go for the maul again, but England halt it, and then Martins, he just smashes Mostert and forces a knock-on. Great defence from England there. And South Africa finding it so hard to get any kind of into the game. On the scoreboard, there's not that much between the teams, and you just feel like South Africa, they just need to find out a little bit more, have one or two things go their way, and they could turn things around. England, though, they win a penalty at the scrum. Kitsoff goes to ground, so set piece kind of going away from South Africa in that first half. England then, they concede a penalty as Mitchell is sealing off, and it's then march forward for the reaction. I think it was of actually Farrell. He has to be ushered away by Marchant as he's kind of losing his cool. We've seen him have a few heated discussions with Ben O'Keefe, but also we saw the same with Khaleesi as well. So neither captain that happy with the referee, and probably a lot of supporters will be the same. But for me, if the referee is pissing off both sets of players, well then it means that for me he's not being biased towards one set or the other at least. Lebok then, he splits the posts to make it 6-3 from the tee. We then have a poor pass from Willemse in his own half. That goes to ground. Laws snaffles that up. Earl carries well, and Khaleesi gets pinged for not rolling away. Farrell steps up to the tee, makes it 9-3. South Africa then, they have a set move from a line out. Aronson comes steaming through the middle, and it's popped down to him, I think, by Etzebeth, who caught it at the back. He makes good ground, but there's just zero support for him, so he gets isolated by England, and they turn the ball over. South Africa again, shortly after that, not straight at a line out. They went to the tail, and they're trying to work their way into the game, but things like this just aren't helping them. It was a couple of times they were not straight in that line out, and as I said, they had that scrum penalty as well. The mauls doesn't seem to be going on that well, so then they decide they're going to replace Lebok with Pollard at 10, and we're around about the 30-minute mark. And, it's a huge call, but it was just after Lebok put up yet another subpar kick from him. It was kind of one where I think it was supposed to be like a cross kick, but one that was contestable, further up the pitch. But it basically went almost straight across the pitch and, put his team in a little bit of trouble. And, he wasn't, it wasn't really a game for running the ball because of the conditions. There was too much, jeopardy with knock-ons and stuff. So I think the fact that his kicking game from hand wasn't going that well kind of forced Nienaber's hand, and he's hooked off. Pollard is on there. And it's a big call, but probably the right call. I really like Lebok as a 10, but he was struggling out there with the conditions. Then Reinark with an average up and under to the edge of the England 22. And, he's lucky that it was kind of spilled backwards by Daly. Then Billy Vunipola, he's on as a blood bin replacement for Curry. He carries and spills the ball forward in contact. And, Marlett against Ping for offside is a penalty to South Africa. So just England errors making, what was an average kick for Reinark, who I thought didn't have that great a game at 9 either, and he actually got hooked early in the second half. But turns it into something good for South Africa. Pollard strokes that over for 9-6. May then takes Colby out in the air as he goes up to claim a high ball, but Peter Steph-Tatai actually gets pinged for blocking. Penalty goes to England. There's more, head shaking on the South African side. I thought that one was a little harsh, honestly. But overall, I thought, O'Keefe wasn't, whoever was going to lose this game, you could see, because some of those decisions were kind of on a knife edge, but the referee's got to decide one way or another. And it felt like some of those decisions, either way that he decided, like, the team that I was against were going to disagree with his interpretation. They were that close. But it was always going to be one of these games, I think, where the losing side was going to put a lot of blame on him. But I thought, he didn't have a terrible game. And there were certainly players out there who had worse games than he did. So I think overall he went all right. But, so we have that penalty for England. And Farrell, he lands that one. It was from kind of long range. It's 12-6. And that ended up being a halftime score. And you felt like, England, they're doing really well. Like the kicking game was working so well for them. Up until this point, they were leading the way in terms of kicks regathered. They had 33. I think New Zealand, having played a game more already with their game against Argentina, were the next best with 31, but they'd gotten like a dozen between, like 6 each against Ireland and Argentina to actually close what was a massive gap between England and all the other teams in that area up to that point. And England, they weren't regathering that many tonight, but the reason they were regathering them through the rest of the tournament was because their kicks, they made their kick, almost every kick contestable, and that's what they were doing tonight. They were getting up, they were slapping the ball back on their own half, or they're making a 50-50 where South Africa potentially would knock on, or the ball would go loose, and if you react quick enough, you were getting there first. So it meant that with all of those factors, it was England who were coming out on top of that. Into the second half, then Reinark, he gets subbed off after about 2 minutes, and it was right after he put up a terrible box kick. It was the one that just went up and down. Faf de Klerk is on for him. England come forward. Farrell, he dabs a kick in behind, really well placed from him. Willemse slips just as he's about to claim it and kind of knocks the ball into touch. Line out in a promising position for England. Willemse then, he gets replaced by Leroux, and it seems like at this stage, like if you're a Bok player and you make an error, you're getting hooked. Like the last three players who were subbed off was basically almost straight after making an error. Then Jamie George, he's not straight, at the line out, and it's a bit of a let off for South Africa there. Snyman then comes on for Etzebeth as South Africa are looking for answers. And Snyman, Etzebeth is a massive player for South Africa, but Snyman had huge impact off the bench. It took a while for that to come in, but in set piece, especially the scrum, having him in there just lent so much weight on that. And then around the loose as well, he had a great game. But from here, George, another poor throw from him into the line out. And this one was basically the wet ball. It just kind of slipped out of his grasp. And then after that, Daly, he knocks on a high kick. A little while later, Mitchell box kicks straight into touch. And England just beginning to make errors that South Africa were making in the first half. South Africa then, they drive England off their own ball as we see that impact from Snyman, coming in there. But also they've taken... was Kitsoff off by then? I think he might have been. And then they attack from that turnover ball. LaRue kicks it through, but the ball beats everyone over the dead ball line. It's 22 dropout to England, but South Africa, you can see that they're beginning to get more territory, and they're beginning to look a little bit more dangerous as well. England, though, they come forward again. Have some great work from Daly in tackling Arendse after a kick. Then there's a massive counter work from England that secures the ball on their side. They get it back to Farrell, and he kicks the long range drop goal, 15-6. And in a game like this, like that is almost a winning margin. You would feel like, England, another score from them, and possibly, it's going to be them going into the final. We then have another contestable kick, breaks for England. Farrell, he hammers it in behind, and Arendse knocks on under pressure from Daly. Scrum to England, close to the South Africa line. And you think, that score, potential drop goal position, they could win a penalty, they could even go for a try that would almost certainly seal that place in the final. But South Africa, they win a penalty at the scrum. Big moment for them, and it turns out to be a massive moment in the game overall, because England didn't really offer much threat to the scoreboard after that. South Africa then win another scrum penalty. Great kick up the line then from Pollard. They attack from the line out into 22. Snyman, he claims it. It's off to Fourie, who comes on a loop around the back of the line out. He, great charge from him. He gets to within not even meters, like he was centimeters away from getting over that line. It's recycled, and then Snyman, he does go over, score. Pollard converts, and it's game on at 15-13. LaRue then, he catches a high kick, almost steps out of the 22 before remembering to call for the mark. And South Africa, for the second time determined to opt for the scrum. We're thinking at this stage they've won penalties at the scrum up to this point. Now with things, beginning to turn in that area in their favour. But this time England are actually solid in the scrum. But then there's another scrum once the ball is cleared round about halfway, and they do win a penalty at this one. It was reset a bunch of times, and you can see Genzak actually gets pinged, but that England front row really were playing for time, and you can't blame them. The referee's not doing anything about it, and if you're allowed to do it, like for me, while I don't like stuff like that, it's not illegal, and if the referee's not picking them up on it, I say more power to them. If that action was able to run the clock down enough that they won the game, then why not do it? Why just make things easy? But South Africa, they have that penalty now. Pollard puts it down. It's a long range one, but we know how good he is from the tee. He absolutely nails it. Puts South Africa in front for the very first time in the game, 16-15. And now it's about, can England respond? They bring on George Ford, obviously in search of getting in that position. We saw him get those 3 drop goals against Argentina. They only need 1 from him in this one, but they've only got a couple of minutes to go. England are holding onto the ball around about halfway. They are trying to get into that drop goal territory or force a penalty, but South Africa are holding them. and they don't, there's not enough threat from England for them to risk giving away a penalty either. Then Bini Vunipola, he knocks on at the death, and it's South Africa win and through to the final. And I actually talked with Mark from 2 Cents Rugby in the build up to this. We talked about the quarterfinals. We also did one on the semi-finals. And one thing we talked about was Bini Vunipola's spot in that England 23. That we were just saying that he doesn't offer any impact off the bench. We couldn't figure why he's in there, because England have back rowers in the squad who would be much better to bring on than him. And we saw in the quarterfinal victory against Fiji, he had very little impact when he come on. In this one, he come on, carried it from the blood, when he was on for the blood bin for a little while, he knocks on in his own 22, and then right at the death, when England needs some kind of impact from him, he knocks the ball on to end the game. And that could potentially be the end. Well, it mightn't be the end of his England career, but I certainly wouldn't select him for the 3rd, 4th place playoff game, but we'll see what Bortwick decides to do. We then have after the whistle and it's around the handbags, I think one of the South African players celebrated a bit too enthusiastically towards some of the England players, but it's fair enough. It was a tight game, and tensions are running high, but that's the end of the game. First of all, let's talk about England. They did so well to make it, first of all, to the semi-final. People say, it was an easy route to the semi-final, etc., etc. But, on that side of the draw, you have to remember, teams still had to step up, and, you can only beat what's put in front of you, right? And that's what they did. They went unbeaten all the way through until this game. And they, until this game here, they were the only unbeaten team left in the entire tournament. So, we saw them getting better and better. Apart from the Samoa game, we saw them getting better as the tournament went on. And then the areas that they did so well in, that got them here, those contestable kicks, we saw those to the fore in this one. The fact that as well, they were very solid themselves at the back when receiving kicks as well, with and that's why I was pretty sure that Marcus Smith, whether he failed return to play protocols or whatever in HIA, I was pretty sure he wasn't going to be selected at least to start in this game, because Stewart is the man that you want out there under those kicks, and he had a great game, I thought, tonight. Both wingers as well were fairly decent too. And Farrell, I thought, was excellent as well with his kicking and just moving his team around the field. In the pack, like Itoji is coming back to his best. Young Martin beside him as well had decent impact there. I thought this starting front row, the likes of Marler, sometimes he can go either way, but he had a great game, I thought, today. George, maybe not so good. A few kind of skew throws at the lineup maybe cost England a little bit from him. But, but then we saw Earl, one of England's best players throughout the entire tournament. We saw Tulagi, not having as much impact, but he did have some impact, and he committed defenders as well. He was a willing carrier too. So, plenty of decent performances from England, not just in this game, but throughout the tournament as well. And I've gone from being just absolutely dire to, being within millimeters of making it through to a World Cup final as well. But then the Springboks, you got to give a lot of credit, to Razi and Nienaber in making those tough calls and just hooking people and not kind of leaving it late, because I talked about what Ireland were. I thought that the likes of Andrew Porter, Sexton, and who else? There was somebody, I can't remember who else it was, but there were, no, it won't come to me. But getting them off earlier, I think, especially Porter giving away all those penalties. But South Africa tonight, they were absolutely ruthless with that. They brought the players on at the right time, and every single player that they brought on had massive impact, and brought them to that victory. Snyman, he come on, he got to try. Pollard with the great kicks. Faf de Klerk kind of settled them a little at 9 as well. When the replacement front row come on, they were so much better than the starting front row. We've seen that through the tournament, actually, where I have a lot of praise for Kitshoff and Malherbe as the starting props, but the replacement props really have outshone them, I think, through this tournament. I wouldn't be surprised if we actually see a switching of who starts and who's on the bench for the final. Certainly probably not going to see Fourie starting at hooker for the final, but I think maybe the two props will be switched. But overall, South Africa, they needed to find a way to win, and they did it. But let's have a quick look at some stats now. So we start with possession. So possession, England had most of the ball, 56% to 44%, and a lot of that was to do with the fact that the retention of the ball after kicks, either directly or just being able to get to that loose ball. It was actually, they had more of the ball in the second half than the first half. It felt like, and sometimes our perception can completely throw us, but it felt like they had more of the ball in the first half, but they only actually had 52% possession in that first half. Territory, okay, I need to refresh this, because right now, World Rugby, or the Rugby World Cup, official thing is telling me that territory was 50% for England and 55% for South Africa. So I'm not sure exactly how that one works out. Percentages should be adding up to 100. I know, I refreshed that and I fixed it. So maybe it was like in between refreshing, but it's saying now 49% for England, 51% for South Africa. I thought it was maybe one of those things where you hear, especially soccer players, saying they gave 110%, which kind of brings you to question, how much effort they think is 100%, if they're not giving their all most of the time. But yeah, South Africa with more of just about shading the territory, but England, I think, were probably on top of that in the first half. Then meters carried, not very many in this game, 246 for England and 188 for South Africa, but it wasn't really a running game. 82 runs to 68. Carries over the gain line, 33 for England and 30 for South Africa. So England slightly shading that, but again, it didn't have a huge impact on the game. Passes 76 to 66. Defenders beating 14 to 15. Offloads 4 to 2, but none of those really had a huge impact. Mauls won 6 to 4, but again, South Africa, they were winning mauls, but England were turning them over just too much. Then kicking, I think, is where it came from. 41 kicks from hand for England, 29 for South Africa. So that's a total of 70 in the game. So a lot more than we've seen in previous South African games, because we talked about how they might have a reputation for a kicking game, but they don't actually kick all that much. But England made 976 meters to 857 from kicks. And it says kicks regathered was 0-0, but England, again, they didn't actually have to regather the kick straight away. They were just batting it back and then winning it that way. In terms of set piece, then England scrum went 3 from 7, so 42.9% for them. A lot of that failure for them was in that second half after Sneijman come on and it changed the props as well. South Africa just got completely on top. South Africa went 7 from 8, 87.5%. The lineouts then 7 from 10 for England. Mostly not too bad, but the ones that went askew were kind of in decent positions and at crucial times as well. South Africa went 15 from 19. Not hugely slick from them either. They're going to have to improve that for next week against the All Blacks, who've only dropped 2 lineouts the entire tournament. So South Africa got to step the game up there. Lineout steals 2 each. If South Africa, though, having said what I said, if South Africa do get 2 steals against New Zealand next week, that would actually be big, again, because of the way that New Zealand lineout has gone. Discipline, 11 penalties for England, 8 for South Africa. South Africa were actually at a pretty high penalty count in that first half, and then the second half, they cleaned things up a little bit, and 8 is fairly decent for the conditions and the fact that it was a semi-final as well. On defence then, England tackling at 80%, South Africa at 84, and 90 tackles from England, 108 from South Africa. And then turnovers, England won 7 to South Africa's 4. So, all of that, like the turnovers for England, etc., that was what got them in the position to potentially win the game. But South Africa, just with that impact in that second half, that try was massive. And then the scrum ultimately, got them the penalty that won the game for them. So, it was so close to England getting through, but South Africa, they found a way to win. Now, next week, they've got to, find another way, I think, to beat the All Blacks. It's going to be, the score. I don't think 16 points is going to win next week. You're probably talking somewhere. It's kind of hard to say. You're probably talking high 20s, early 30s. Will be enough to win, but that's a big score, I think, to put up in a final against against either of these, New Zealand or South Africa. But we'll talk more about that next week when we get into the previews. For now, it's a great win for South Africa, and they head on to that game.